You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Will, and you're listening to One Good Scare, the show where we explore our favorite horror movies. I'll be honest, today's episode has me a little torn, because it's a movie that's one of the most impactful ever made, in the history of cinema. But it's also one that, honestly, might be a little bit of a disappointment after the first watch. We're talking about the Blair Witch Project. Now, before we dive in, don't forget you can follow One Good Scare on Instagram at OneScarePod and TikTok at One Good Scare Pod. Make sure to follow, leave a comment or two. You guys know I love interacting, discussing, debating, all those things. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Pods. It lets me know you're enjoying the show, and guys, that goes a long way to keeping it going. And remember, I say this every episode because it's super important. My goal with One Good Scare is not to replace your viewing experience. It's to enhance it. Think of the show as a sort of visual aid for the movie itself. So if you haven't seen the Blair Witch Project, or maybe if it's been a while, my strong encouragement is to watch it first, then come back and give the show a listen. Of course, if you'd rather listen than watch, I appreciate that as well. Just remember that One Good Scare is one gigantic spoiler. All right. Let's dive right into what I think is a slightly controversial found footage flick, The Blair Witch Project. Right off the bat, it's important to understand a few things about this movie, because it's inarguably one of the most important horror movies, maybe just movies in general, ever made, because it popularized the found footage subgenre of horror. Now, it wasn't the first found footage movie. A lot of folks credit Cannibal Holocaust with utilizing the filmmaking technique back in the early 1980s. But the Blair Witch Project did, in fact, help solidify found footage movies as an effective way to tell a story. It's also important to understand the cultural context in which this movie came out, because if it had come out later than it did, I'm not sure that it would have worked. I've said before that movies are a sort of time capsule, right? Pointing us back to a bygone time and place. This is especially true of the Blair Witch Project, because when it released in 1999, there was literally no such thing as social media. There were no smartphones, and in fact, the internet was still in its early days, with the majority of people still connecting to America Online, AOL, by dial-up. Despite this, the Blair Witch Project may have been the first movie to ever go viral on the internet, because the marketing campaign for this movie is inarguably one of the best ever. Guys, I promise you I'm not overstating this. Let me paint a quick picture for you. I had just turned 15 years old when this movie released, and I saw it in theaters, maybe not opening night, but definitely within a few days. And it was largely due to something called Curse of the Blair Witch, a documentary that released on the Sci-Fi Channel 3 weeks before the theatrical release of the actual movie. Remember, we didn't have streaming services back then, and Netflix was still a few years away from being popularized, so we had to watch things on cable TV. And the short documentary laid the groundwork for the movie by giving us the history and the lore behind the supposed Blair Witch, showing us unseen footage of the 3 college students who allegedly disappeared in the woods, and even more. And in the lead up to the movie, they designed an actual Blair Witch website that had so many of us glued to our gigantic fucking computer screens back in the day. And you may be interested to know this. You can still access parts of the original Blair Witch website using the Wayback Machine and Internet Archive. I actually thumbed through it last night prior to recording, and I'll tell you, it's still unsettling to this day. So, now that you have the cultural context, by the time the movie released on July 30th, 1999, audiences, myself included, were excited and terrified. Excited because the marketing and trailer made the movie seem larger than life. And terrified because we knew going in that we were about to watch a movie where 3 young adults in real life met an untimely demise and actually may have been murdered. Because everything about this movie was presented as real, as in these 3 people actually went into the woods, they actually disappeared, and they may have actually been murdered in real life. And I mentioned that the movie is sort of disappointing after the first watch because, honestly, all of it was just marketing. None of it was real. The 3 actors were exactly that, just actors. And while the entire thing was a beautifully crafted piece of movie marketing, honestly, I couldn't help but feel duped and let down. especially since the movie didn't really give us much of anything, other than 3 students walking around the woods hearing scary sounds at night. Listen, we'll get there. Before we dive in, let me give you one final thought. I won't do my usual cut-ins between scenes or acts, and that's for 2 reasons. First, the movie doesn't really follow a script, so it watches like a stream of consciousness. And I think that's a super important aspect of this movie, because really what we're watching is a descent into madness for these 3 individuals. And second, as is the new norm for the show, I have a special guest who I'm going to explore all things Blair Witch Project in the second half of the show. Alright, enough of my chaos. It's time to settle in and turn down the lights as we explore an important horror movie, The Blair Witch Project. The movie opens with the words, The Blair Witch Project, followed by a caption that reads, In October of 1994, 3 student filmmakers disappeared in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, while shooting a documentary. A year later, their footage was found. A fuzzy camera fades into a shot of a young woman who introduces the viewer to her home as a cameraman talks in the background. She says she's going to leave the comfort of her home for the weekend to explore the Blair Witch. She then shows us a stack of books related to the Blair Witch, including one that details, quote, what happened at Coffin Rock, end quote. The camera then takes us to the driveway, where another guy steps out of his car. He shows his camera, and it's obvious that he's going to be the cinematographer. The next scene shows one of the guys, Josh, with his head on the table. He asks about Mikey, and the woman Heather says they need to pick him up and that they're behind schedule. We then see Mike walking out of his house towards the car. The group is introducing themselves to each other, and it's obvious they don't really know each other that well. We then see them buying essential food and other items at the grocery store. Then the documentary begins. Heather asks a server at a restaurant if she's ever heard of the Blair Witch. The server responds it sounds kind of familiar, and that her older sister went to Blair High School. We then see Heather talking about her priorities for the documentary, before it shifts to their official first take of the film. They each kiss the first slate, and Heather introduces us to Burkittsville and its history. With the first scene done, the crew celebrates and continues their interviews around town. One older gentleman says he heard about the Blair Witch and talks about a man named Rustin Parr, an old hermit who lived on top of a mountain. Another woman says she's heard about the Blair Witch several times and that she saw a documentary on the Discovery Channel. Another guy says it was an urban legend that his grandmother told him. Stay up late and the Blair Witch will come and get you. The scene cuts back to the older gentleman, who details an incident in the winter of 1940 when a handful of young kids disappeared. No one knew why they'd gone missing. Going back to the woman, she says the creepiest story she ever heard was that 2 men were hunting and they were near the cabin she was supposed to haunt, and they simply disappeared, never to be seen again. Back to the older gentleman. He tells about Rustin Parr and a time when he came into town and said, "I'm finally finished." No one knew what he meant at first, but then police searched his house and found the bodies of 7 kids. Back to the younger gentleman. He says Rustin Parr took the kids into the basement by twos and made one face the corner before killing the other one. Then he would kill the second. He says that Rustin Parr made them face the corner because he couldn't feel the eyes on him. They then interview another woman who says she believes in witches and witchcraft, while another older gentleman says he doesn't believe in that and that he's a religious man. Back to the first woman. She says she believes something is going on in the woods and that she believes enough not to go up there. The first gentleman says the woods are haunted and that a woman named Mary Brown said this to him, and that many believe that she is crazy. The crew then pulls up to a small trailer where they interview Mary Brown. She said she had an encounter with the Blair Witch and tells the story of a day when she was fishing with her dad. She was laying down on a bed of leaves watching her fishing pole when all of a sudden she felt something near her, like an eerie feeling. It was like a woman with hairy hands and arms, except she had a shawl covering her arms. The woman didn't say anything, but just kept staring at her silently. The woman then opened her shawl, and there was hair all over. She says her face was strange looking. Back in the car, the crew mocks Mary Brown, who may very well have been suffering from mental illness. A quick cutscene shows Heather and Josh going back and forth about the camera they're going to use to film the documentary. Heather seems annoyed and is pressing Josh about using the lens with the correct measurements. We then see her asking Mike how they felt about the day. Josh says they learned about shooting documentaries, and they continue celebrating with beer and snacks. Then they do a quick equipment check and start preparing for what will be a long day the next morning. The next morning, the crew heads out on the road, and they start with an interview of a fisherman who says he's heard myths about the Blair Witch, but simply doesn't believe them. Another fisherman joins in, and they give her permission to be in the documentary. They then tell the story of Robin Weaver, a young girl who disappeared in the woods, and 3 days later she just reappeared on her grandmother's porch, baffling the community. Robin was babbling about some woman whose feet never touched the ground. The second fisherman then tells a story about a gray mist rising up out of the water and up the tree, before disappearing entirely. He says it all ties into Coffin Rock, because the area has been haunted by an old woman for years. The crew then heads deeper into the woods before going out to hike. They're all carrying packs with clothes, tents, food, and equipment. Heather narrates the documentary as they cross streams, walk along trails, and trek towards Coffin Rock. They finally make it, and Heather reads from a book which tells the story of a tragedy that befell 5 men at the site. Quote, "Each man's hands bound to the next man's feet, forming a solid structure out of the men." End quote. The men were tortured and disemboweled, and markings were etched into the men's faces. The bodies of the men were discovered, but when authorities returned to Coffin Rock, vultures were seen at the site, but the men were nowhere to be found. The next scene takes us back into the woods as the crew treks to their campsite. Rain falls as they pitch their tents, and they're unable to start a fire. A quick shot shows them bantering about farting in the tent. The next morning, Josh says he heard 2 separate noises in the middle of the night. One was like an owl, and the other was like a cackling. Mike says that if he heard a cackling, he would have shit his pants. The crew checks the map, and Heather says she knew where they were going, but Josh says she got them lost, which Heather admits. She says she's happy with how the documentary is going, and she's pleasantly surprised by little Mikey. Josh asks Heather if she thinks the Blair Witch exists, and Heather says she doesn't know. The crew is then back hiking towards their next site. For a few seconds, Heather pans in on Mike's chest hair, and he responds, "You should see my ass." Okay, so I want to cut in quickly here. The tension between the three is really obvious, and kind of a bit cringy to watch. Heather is clearly trying to be in control. We've seen her go back and forth a few times about the camera lens, her preferences for the documentary, and now the map. And she seems to enjoy picking on Mike, who for his part seems to be genuinely fucking annoyed. Remember, these three really didn't know each other before the weekend. They were sort of partnered up for this project. So we're not watching a small group of close friends hike and camp in the woods for the weekend. Their physical discomfort is matched by their relational discomfort. It's one thing to hike for hours in the rain, and it's another thing entirely to do it with people you don't know that well, and honestly, maybe don't even like. Alright, back to the movie. As they hike, Heather says they should get to a cemetery in about 90 minutes, but the guys are skeptical that she knows where she's going. Mike and Josh push back and say she's full of shit, and that she's going less off the map and more off what people have told her about the area. Mike wants her to admit they're lost, but Heather says they're not, and they never have been. Mike pushes back, and Heather counters with, "Did you agree to do this project?" Mike says he did, but that it's becoming something else entirely. Josh tries to mediate and has the group look at the map. Mike says it looks like Greek to him and that it's useless in his hands, and he gives it back to Heather and says his life is in her hands. Then he says he doesn't trust her. He's annoyed about the camera constantly being in his face. As they cross a stream on a log, Heather tries to give a motivational speech, but Josh tells her to shut the fuck up. They make it across and continue trekking. Heather says they're very, very, very close now. And then she notices a strange rock formation on the ground and in the tree. There are piles of rocks everywhere, and Heather tries to recount the Bible story Mary Brown told her. She counts 7 piles of rocks. That night, the group banters about how each of them compared to the cast of Gilligan's Island, and then Heather begins filming the rock formations at night. Suddenly, she gasps as one of the guys knocks over a pile of rocks. Heather puts them back neatly and says, "Can't be too careful." The camera quickly cuts to black, and Heather calling out, "Hello." It's the middle of the night, and there are strange noises outside. It sounds like snapping branches when Heather says, "It's all around us." Mike refuses to go down there, and Heather says he's fucking scared. The next morning, the crew is back on the trail as the rain pours down. Heather asks Josh what he thinks the sounds were, and he says it was someone fucking with Heather's head. She explains that when she heard the sounds, all she could think of was getting audio and video. Mike says it sounded like someone was running around, and that he's not messing around with anyone who would go so deep in the woods just to scare them. The crew continues walking, and Heather says they have to go back to go forward, 2 hours max to their destination. They're walking back to the car, but Mike and Josh are skeptical that she knows where they're going. They check the map, and Heather says it seems like they're still on the trail. She directs them, but Josh says they're in the middle of nowhere. Mike chimes in, and the tensions are high as they worry about being lost. Heather says they should set up camp, and Mike tells her to turn the camera off and get them home. Mike begins screaming, and Josh encourages them to check the map. Day turns to night, and they're still lost. The guys are worried about getting the camera back and being at work on time, when finally, they decide to camp for the night. And again, like the night before, they hear strange sounds in the woods. Heather turns on a camera and calls out from her tent. It's absolutely freezing outside. The sounds continue in the distance. This time it sounds like rocks being piled or toppled. Heather calls out again, but no one responds. She says it could be a deer, but that it sounds like the noise from the night before. Heather says she doesn't think it's a deer and that the noise sounds like it's all around them. They say that it sounds like footsteps somewhere out in the woods. Mike asks if it's close to sunrise, but Heather tells him it's 3 a.m., which is the witching hour. The next morning, Heather discovers 3 piles of rocks outside of their tent, and Josh asks if she's sure they weren't there when they set up. Heather says there's no way, and Josh says they need to get back to the car immediately. They're not welcome, and they need to go. The next scene shows Heather checking her pockets for the map. She asks Josh if he has it, and he says he doesn't. He chastises her for being irresponsible, and she says that one of the guys had to have taken it. They both deny it, and tensions are now sky high. They continue arguing about the map, and Mike walks ahead, following the creek. We then see them lying down on the grass, and Josh says the situation is fucked up, and Mike says they need to work together to get home. Heather says it's hard to get lost in America, and even harder to stay lost. Mike says they're doing a good job of it. Josh says at some point, people are going to start looking for them. Eventually they come to a creek, and Mike says he got soaked. He laughs hysterically, but we're not sure if it's genuine or because he's losing it. Heather crosses, but her feet are now soaked as well, which causes Mike to laugh harder. He starts yelling, and Heather asks again about the map, saying the guys seem to be having too much fun for the situation. Josh bites his tongue, but Heather presses, causing him to walk away. Mike continues laughing in the background, And then he drops a bombshell. He kicked the map into the creek the day before because he felt it was useless. He says, "I kicked that fucker into the creek," while laughing hysterically. Heather and Josh react, and they run to him immediately, with both Josh and Heather hitting and pushing Mike. He says the map was useless as Heather calls him an asshole. Josh and Mike almost fistfight as Mike yells once again that the map was useless. He starts apologizing, but Heather quickly cuts him off. He then starts yelling, saying Heather had no idea how to use the map. Pissed off, she charges Mike, and the scene cuts. Heather then asks Mike for the compass, and she says he betrayed them by getting rid of the map. Josh asks for the compass, and they argue before stalling completely. Suddenly, Mike calls out to the group and says there's, quote, all sorts of voodoo shit, end quote, down here where he's at. He says it's hanging all around them. Heather looks and sees stick figures hanging in the trees. There are dozens of them hanging and swinging quietly. The group is silent as they film, unsure of what's happening. After a while, Mike pleads to get out of the woods, and Josh agrees. Heather, continuing to film, draws Mike's ire as he starts yelling at her, and then for help. As they walk, Heather finally admits that they're lost in the woods. Day turns to night, and Mike suggests they'd not light a fire or turn on any lights. Suddenly, Heather wakes up gasping. There's a strange noise coming from outside, though it's initially difficult to make out. If you listen closely, you can hear what sounds like little kids laughing and running. And as they get ready to record, their tent starts shaking violently. They run out of the tent as little kids laugh. They're now running in the pitch black woods, not knowing where they're going or what they're running from. Heather catches up to Mike, and he says to turn the flashlight off. Then, all we hear is them breathing and asking, what the fuck is going on? Heather asks if they heard the baby screaming, and Josh and Mike says there is no baby out there. The next morning, the three move back to the campsite and notice things are missing, and Josh notices slime near his belongings. Heather continues to film, and Mike pleads with her to turn the camera off so they can get back to hiking towards the car. Josh's belongings have been tossed around, and though Heather asks why, Josh isn't interested. Mike and Heather then get into a shoving match, and Heather bites him. Mike threatens to throw her in the woods if she bites him again. She apologizes, and they head back out on the trail, except Josh is struggling and sitting off by himself. Mike tells her to give them a few minutes and explains that he's struggling. Heather pushes back, but Mike pleads with her to be patient. Josh then calls out and asks for a cigarette, and then asks about the slime on his belongings. Heather says they need to go, and Mike says they need to do it soon because what's happening at night is going to get worse. They start walking, with Mike and Josh singing the national anthem. As they walk, Mike says they've already crossed the stream. Somehow they've walked in circles and gone absolutely nowhere. Heather says it's not the same log on the same stream, but Mike says it is, causing Heather to sob. Meanwhile, Josh and Mike, who are shocked that they've simply been walking in circles all that time, are in the distance yelling "fuck" over and over. The group goes back and forth about where to camp that night, and Heather asks Josh what he wants to do. He tells her, "I want to make movies, Heather. Isn't that what we're here to do? Let's make some movies." She responds, "Fuck you." Mike tries to mediate and asks them to stop fighting immediately. He says he will take first watch. Josh immediately starts flipping his shit. There's no one to help them. Piles of rocks, things hanging in the trees. They're wandering aimlessly. There's no one to help them. Heather is on the verge of a breakdown, and she tells Josh it's all she has left as she pleads with him to stop. Mike says they need to get moving and that they all have different lives. Heather walks away, and the next scene cuts to inside the tent. They're camping another night. They talk about the absurdity of the situation and that they're sleeping in the same place they were the night before, despite having spent the entire day walking. Josh apologizes to Mike and Heather, and the group talks about cheeseburgers and mashed potatoes. The scene cuts to the next morning as Heather calls out for Josh. He seems to have wandered off. But Heather is hysterical. Mike calls Josh, but there's no response. Heather recalls Josh talking about the slime on his bag, and Mike says they need to find him. Heather sits on the ground ruminating on Josh leaving. His belongings are still there, and Mike and Heather talk about the direction they want to go in. They ultimately decide to go east. In the next scene, they're putting up the tent again. Josh is still gone. The two sit there talking about the food they're going to eat when they get home. Soon, night settles in, and Heather and Mike hear Josh screaming in the distance. They're not sure where it's coming from, but he's yelling and sounds like he's in pain and screaming for help. They continue calling him, but they get no response. The next morning, Heather steps out of the tent and finds a small bundle of sticks just outside. She tosses it away from the tent, but eventually unravels it and finds something horrifying. Teeth, blood, and hair wrapped in a small bit of fabric. Heather hyperventilates and begins sobbing when she sees it. The fabric looks like Josh's flannel shirt. She rinses her hands off in a stream and is damn near having a panic attack. After a while, Heather and Mike continue walking before the scene cuts to the night. Heather is staring directly into the camera, apologizing to everyone for being naive. She says she's sorry for everything that has happened because she believes it's her fault. It was her project. She insisted on everything. She insisted they weren't lost. She insisted they keep going. She insisted that they walk south. Everything had to be her way, and this is where they ended up. She says it's her fault they're hungry, cold, and hunted. She tells her parents she loves them and apologizes again. Then we see her eyes shift to the right, and she immediately begins sobbing. She says she's too scared to close her eyes, but she's too scared to open them. She says she's going to die out there. Suddenly, the camera cuts to black, and we hear Josh yelling, "Somebody!" from a distance. Mike and Heather grab their camera and go out in search of Josh in the pitch-black woods. Suddenly, they come up on a house. The two enter, Mike in front and Heather just behind. The house is in shambles as they walk through. It's falling apart with holes in the floors, walls, and ceilings. Everything is eerily quiet, until suddenly, Mike hears Josh yelling. He immediately runs up the stairs and calls for Josh. And as he does, we notice small handprints covering the walls. Children's handprints. Mike reaches the top of the stairs, but Josh isn't there, and Heather is just below him. Josh continues yelling, and they now run down the stairs. Mike takes off, and Heather struggles to keep up. The camera alternates between Mike and Heather's cameras. Mike reaches the basement and walks into the room, when suddenly he's attacked by someone unseen. Heather, meanwhile, is still screaming for Mike and walking slowly down the stairs. When she reaches the basement, she pans the camera right and sees Mike standing in the corner. She's then attacked from behind, and the camera falls before the screen shakes, and the end credits roll. And the Blair Witch has come to an end. Okay. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick thoughts of my own before we dive into the special guest portion. Now, for me, what made this movie so scary was at least two things. First, I grew up in and around New York City, far, far away from any wooded areas, any jungle-like settings. I just grew up around tall buildings and concrete sidewalks. So at 15 years old, the idea of walking in the woods and hiking and potentially disappearing and maybe even being murdered was honestly literally the stuff of my nightmares. And even now, I don't love the idea of camping or hiking or woodsing, whatever you call it. It just doesn't appeal to me in those ways. But second, and I think this might speak to some of the controversy surrounding the movie, because I constantly am hearing that the Blair Witch Project is slow, nothing really happens, it's an hour and 25 minutes of 3 people walking in the woods. Listen, I hear it, I get it, and honestly, I agree with you. But what this movie manages to do really, really well is force us to deal with our own imagination, because we're sort of forced to fill in the blanks. Apart from the references to the supernatural, there's really nothing supernatural happening. Apart from the references to the Blair Witch, we never actually see her. We hear the strange, scary sounds in the middle of the night, but is that a figment of their imagination? Or were there really people and kids running around the woods in the middle of the night? We don't really know, and that's the beauty of this film, because it's entirely plausible that 3 college students would go camping in the woods to film a documentary, get lost, stumble upon an abandoned house, and fall victim to someone or something. And I have a sort of theory that the Blair Witch wasn't responsible for what went on in the film. I actually think that maybe Josh and Mike were in cahoots, working together to do the whole thing with Heather as the victim. All right, I'll pause there, because I always ask your thoughts on a movie. And when I posted on Threads and Instagram what your thoughts were on the Blair Witch Project, you all came through tenfold. So here's what you thought about this movie. From Films I Fucking Like, which is a great name, by the way. I saw it as a bootleg in my college housing. We were all crowded around a small CRT TV and watched. It was a darker version, as it had been pirated so many times. So when the ending came, we edged closer to see what was happening. And we all freaked out. Amazing. From MT Paranormal Life. I love the fact that it was made with the appearance of being 100% real. I hated the fact that it was not real. One of my all-time favorites. From darkcity.podcast. It was brilliant for many reasons. The shaky footage, which is a clever found footage technique, made me dizzy in the theater. Small price to pay. From the Scary Movie Project. What I love is everything. What I hate is nothing. The fear that slowly builds, and the realization that they are becoming trapped in the woods by an unseen force. Also, watching them turn on each other. From Tales, Trails, and Taverns. They never showed whatever the monster, /witch, /evil entity was. That built the suspense. You had no idea where it was, how close it was, or if it was deadly at all. It could have all been in the characters' heads for all we know, lending to the idea that the worst monsters out there are people. And at the time, found footage was a new idea. From Acadia After Dark. Regardless of the actual content of the film, it changed the way horror movies were made and may be the first example of successful viral marketing, which has become common today. It's my favorite horror movie of all time. From Anastasia writes, the scariest thing about this movie was your imagination. Just the thought of some kind of supernatural force in the woods, plus the woods themselves, was enough to terrify us for the whole movie. From the Spooky Shed podcast. It started the found footage genre and is still the best one, closely followed by the first Paranormal Activity. From Waltzes with Ghosts. Loved it. From projectile__varmint. The branding and the lore behind the marketing. Perfection. From Beyond the Screen podcast. The world building is masterful, with the subtle foreshadowing in the townspeople's early remarks coming full circle in the final basement scenes with Mike. Never known fear like it. I was 18, and it terrified me. From Cult of Nightmares. Nothing bad about it. Certainly believable. Scary. Being lost in the woods could happen to any of us. Original. From Chills and Thrills podcast. It was definitely ahead of its time, because if you think about it, if the Blair Witch was released around 2000 to 2003, the viral marketing would not have been as successful as it was in 1999, because we were introduced to social media, and it would have been debunked almost immediately. From It Is 2004 Again. Well, back then, we thought it was real, so that alone made it really eerie. I rewatch it every so often, and I still really enjoy it, although the scare factor is a lot less intense. Still top tier for me. From Ian Lindsay. And a quick side note, I did get permission to share this comment. He says, I was on coke when I saw it in the theater. Laugh out loud. And from Lex.B. Thuggin. I hate that the found footage aspect made me dizzy, but I love that it was different by using the found footage aspect. It's a love-hate relationship. So as you can see, this movie is pretty well loved. People really enjoyed it, both when it first came out and even now, 25, 26 years after the fact. A huge thank you and shout out to everyone that commented. You guys know I absolutely love this kind of discussion, and I look forward to what future movies will bring to the conversation. All right, so as we transition into the discussion/conversation, I'm going to introduce you to a special guest of mine. His name is Chris Lee, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because he's my co-host on The Horror Lab, the OG horror movie show that we did years ago and is still sorta kinda hanging on. So he's going to join me for our discussion on the Blair Witch, and we are just going to dive right in. Here we go. Unlike other movies, Chris, that are super complicated and super complex, I feel like the Blair Witch is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And I mean, and it's such a tiny budget.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And no-name actors. In fact,
Yeah.
I mentioned I have some like disappointment with the movie now watching it. When I first watched it the very first time, it was scary. It was genuinely scary. And I think some of that might have been the media hype surrounding the movie. You know, for a long time it was, all right, well, hold on. Let me pause there. I'll go back to that. Chris, what did you think of the movie? Let's start with that.
I think this is my first time watching it completely.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, I enjoyed it. It was sort of scary, but I usually watch the movies on my iPad at night.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think my they say it's found footage, but from the get-go, I could tell this movie was immediately like edited to make sense, right?
Sure.
It's not a real documentary.
Sure.
And so, so that I forgot what the phrase is, but my sense of reality was not suspended, right?
Sure.
I know I was looking at a movie, but
Sure.
I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I feel like this movie should be seen on a huge screen.
Okay, so what's interesting is the horror movies generally don't scare me. I'm not very. It takes a lot to scare me, but
Yeah.
I find myself most unsettled when I'm either watching it on a huge screen in a movie theater or I'm watching it on a small screen like a phone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because the small screens leave a whole lot of dark space around me that can be filled in by shit my mind is like imagining, right? Or
Yeah.
that might actually be there. But for some reason, small screens and big screens really make me unsettled. Watching it on a regular TV screen at home doesn't really have that same effect. But I'm super interested, Chris. Did you feel like the movie was obviously it's a found footage that's almost 25 years old. There have been a bajillion found footage movies that have released since then, all generally in the horror genre, right? Did you find this movie to be particularly dated, or like it felt like it was dated?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, just because the technology they use, but at the same time, because they're in the middle of a forest, there's no real technology that they use.
Yeah.
It could seem kind of timeless. It could be anywhere in the 90s, 2000s, or even today, I think. So it wasn't too bad. I mean, found footage also is kind of gimmicky.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I don't know.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Like, So when I had first when it first came out in the theaters in the '90s, I was a teenager, middle of high school, ninth, 10th grade, something like that. Found footage wasn't really a thing
Yeah.
at that point. I don't think the Blair Witch was the first. Blair Witch Project was the first found footage movie, but I think it was the first or maybe most influential found footage movie. There is an extreme horror movie that came out in either '79 or '80, Cannibal Holocaust, that was super controversial. Definitely a found footage film. In fact, after it was released, the Italian authorities arrested the director and charged him with murder because the documentary, the found footage was so convincing, and they had assumed that he had led the people that are in the movie to their actual deaths, and he just, instead of intervening and calling for help, he recorded it. Obviously, it was found later to be a hoax, right? It was a found footage. It was all a movie, a film. But the Blair Witch Project had similar marketing, right? Three college students, go into the woods to film their, senior thesis and, documentary, and they didn't come out, and they've been missing until now. We have their footage. All we found are cameras, right? And so, like, not having a point of reference for found footage, that was pretty compelling. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we're about to see three people wander around the woods until they disappear or die. So you already went into the movie with this angst, like what actually is going to happen to them? What horrors are going to unfold? So in that sense, they had a website in it. Like, this is the early stages of the internet, but like
Yeah.
they had a website, and it was a pretty massive marketing strategy
Yeah.
to get
I,
this
I
movie out.
I love the posters that they had.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like these people were missing.
Yeah, like
And
the side of a milk carton.
yeah. I felt like this movie was very emblematic of just the time, the zeitgeist. This is the beginning of the internet, and promotional materials and the marketing is like big now.
Yeah,
With all the websites and the QR codes and videos and all these things. But in the '90s, that wasn't really a big thing.
that's right.
And so, and even found footage, it has been around since the 1980s, with Cannibal Holocaust. But there is something with the advent of, camcorders and phone cameras that you could kind of record real time, and just document everything. And
Yeah,
so we see the consequences of what it led up to today, with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests and all
yeah,
the things happening today. But yeah, but for this time, it's very new.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that also happened around this time, with the Columbine massacre and real, like, the news were showing, like, cell phone footage and like people calling the phone, like the sense of terror from real life is like
Yeah,
very pervasive, and I think the Blair Witch Project really symbolizes all of that.
yeah. I think that's good because this is a truly imperfect comparison, and I sort of mean it tongue in cheek, but maybe not. It it almost feels like they were the first social media influencers. Almost like they were, like, obviously movies in general, social media is super voyeuristic anyway, right? I mean, all of it. And so it sort of has that appeal. Like, you can almost, watching the Blair Witch Project, you can almost take some of those little clips, those 2-minute clips, like where she's, on screen apologizing to the
Yeah,
parents, and like, and she's got like snot dripping down her nose,
yeah,
and like it's becoming her snack, like a midnight snack kind of thing. Like, it's as long as a reel, like a TikTok reel would be, right? Or an Instagram reel would be, 2 minutes, and it's like, oh my gosh. And you could you could almost picture like the little eyeball in the upper left corner with how many viewers are watching that at that
yeah,
moment.
yeah.
It sort of has that feel.
That's such a good point.
Like, in some ways it feels ahead of its time.
Yeah,
Maybe sort of an unwilling, maybe ignorant prophet of sorts, but it does feel super dated. Like, the technology that they actually show in the film is obviously of its time. And to me, it's a massive plot hole. Like I couldn't, and maybe this was why I was super disappointed. Like these people are wandering in the woods for days. They didn't have portable chargers. There were no outlets plugged into trees. It's
Yeah.
not like they could have charged those cameras were gigantic, which means those battery packs were gigantic. How the hell did they record for 3 or 4 days on end with no extra supplies?
Yeah. I didn't really use camcorders back then, so I didn't know that. But now that you tell me, makes the movie seem really dumb.
Yeah. So, and I guess maybe the cross-examination rebuttal, is, well, the movie was obviously edited, so how do we know this wasn't 2 hours worth of footage that looks like it's spread out? I don't know. I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt. I think the movie was I thought it was scary when it first came out. I remember walking out of the theater thinking to myself, because at that point I still thought they were like actually like they had died. I remember thinking like, holy shit, are we all accomplices to murder? Like, why are we watching this? Did we just watch a snuff film and laugh when he says he kicks it into the map into the river, and then they're like horrified 30 seconds later when they all die? Like it was a wild range of emotions
Yeah.
for a pubescent 15-year-old to have to deal with on a Friday night at 11 p.m. after going to the movies. Like, it was way too much, it was, I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
But now I watch it and I'm like, oh, it's just a lot of them walking in the woods complaining.
Yeah.
Like, you could cut that hour and a half down to a 35, 40-minute short film, and you might not lose the effectiveness of the film.
Yeah. I feel like it could have been like just an hour.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess maybe they were trying to build tension, and to some extent they did. I mean, but so something interesting about the movie, Chris, they actually did. I remember reading, and I haven't done a whole lot of extra reading for this episode, but I remember reading years ago that the principal cast, the three main actors, were actually hiking and camping in the woods, and the sort of nighttime scares, the shaking of the tent, and all of the noises out in the distance, they were unaware of those things until they were actually happening. So,
Yeah.
from what I understood, the actual like fear responses were legitimate. They were actually, demonstrating their own feel, like they had their own fear responses to what was going on. And so I found that interesting. That sort of lent an air of authenticity to what they were doing.
Yeah. It seemed borderline abusive.
I mean, it does. Like, you just
Yeah.
got three people going out into the woods to camp, and then all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
scaring the shit out of them.
Yeah. Apparently, in the last scenes in the house, like Mike and Heather both were hyperventilating just because of how terrifying the filming
Interesting.
was. Yeah.
So I definitely, all right, we normally talk themes. I'm not sure there are a whole lot of themes in this movie.
Yeah.
It seems pretty as shallow as the creek that the map, was kicked into. It really is pretty, I feel like, anyway, I could be wrong, Chris, but it feels super straightforward.
There are certain things. You brought up voyeurism.
Yep.
I've quoted David Fincher saying people are perverts, and so
Yep.
that's why I thought your point about this being like a precursor to like social influencers was a really, really good point, because I think about when Logan Paul was in like the Death of Forest.
Oh,
the Forest of Death
that's right.
In Japan.
In Japan.
And he showed this person who come morning had died by suicide. He was hanged. So yeah, like I thought that was a really interesting point. Like, why would you go into the forest and look up this terrifying person for no reason? You say it's for history, but is it?
I mean, there's a part of all of us to some, to varying degrees, and obviously that spectrum goes from like maybe a normal range of curiosity to, sexual sadists who need to be locked far and away from other humans, right? But I think to some degree we all have some sense of fascination with morbid stuff. It at least piques, or even just the concept of like death and dying. leaves us curious, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me that definitely resonates with why the hell are you going into the woods for no
Yeah.
reason? Like,
Why are you going to the house at the end of the
yeah, you
movie?
definitely okay, thank you. Like if I'm traipsing through the woods and I'm lost and all of a sudden out of the pitch black darkness I see this old ass house appear. Nope. I'm not going in there.
Yeah.
Like the witch, if the witch is going to kill me, she's going to have to get me on her doorstep. But I am not going into the witch's lair to be easy pickings for her. There's no way, right? So on the one end, I resonate with that, like, what the hell are you doing? On the other end, though, there's a part of me that's like, I might go in that house. Like, I might. And maybe it's like a super inflated ego or sense of self that's like, grandiosity, like, that witch got them, but she hasn't met me yet. That kind of thing, almost like
Yeah.
Joey Tribbiani from Friends, like, hey, like, like that, you have that little attitude about you. And yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. I think the movie does a good job of sort of touching on the morbid curiosity we all have, maybe the danger that's inherent within that at times.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of address it in the movie, right?
They
Like,
do.
Josh yelling at Heather, why are you still recording?
That's true.
And Heather says, this is all I have left.
Which is just a weird statement.
Yeah.
Like, you've
It's
been in the
like,
woods
this
for
is the only
12
thing-
hours.
This is the only thing keeping you alive.
Like, right. I'm not even sure that you were far enough to not hear the rumble of traffic on the main road. And you're already having an existential crisis about, being out there.
We all do things that are inexplicable.
That is true.
Things that give us rushes.
That's
like those
true.
those people who climb. Is this splunking? I don't know what it is. When they crawl through like these tight spaces and caves.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot what that's called.
Yeah,
but
we call that, don't do that. That's what we're going to call it. Don't do this. That's crazy. And if you're a listener who does that, stop. Stop. Yeah. Stop doing that. I mean, better you than me is really what I mean to say. Like, I'm glad you love it. By all means, have at it. But it feels like that. You're right. I don't know. Maybe there's a commentary, maybe an unintentional commentary that crisis leads to tunnel vision to some extent. I mean, and I think the movie does a good job of making what really could just be boiled down to human error, making it seem paranormal, supernatural, right? I mean, they walk in a circle for an entire day. First they start at the river, then they walk for a long time, and then they end up back at the river, right? You're sort of left disoriented, like, did the forest change around them, or is this the result of fatigue and dehydration and exhaustion? You see what I'm saying? And so I don't know. Maybe there's a commentary or discussion to be had about crisis and our responses amidst crisis. I don't know. I don't feel like this movie is the best way to have that conversation.
Yeah, it makes me think about Winnie the Pooh. It had tried to say something about trauma,
Yes.
and abandonment, but they did it with the grace of an elephant or a bull in a china shop.
It's very true. Like, and I get everybody's got a voice. I agree with that, and everybody's got agency to use that voice. I'm not denying that. And every movie has a voice to say something, right? In filming and the direction of the movie, all of that. But this movie doesn't say a whole lot about maybe what it's trying to say. So as long as we have that awareness that not every movie, even though they're trying, not every movie succeeds in what they're trying to do. I don't know. I'm content to leave this as a supernatural thriller. These people got lost in the woods. The woods are haunted by a witch. Therefore, the paranoia psychosis they experience is witch induced, not due to human elements or
Yeah.
things like that. I'm okay with it. I'm content with that. I don't
Yeah.
feel like I have to think too much within that. Uh, all right, dude, let's talk about the. All right, so the ending. Maybe we work our way backwards a little bit. So at the end of the movie, they're searching for Josh. Right, Josh disappears one night. It's just Mike and Heather at that point. They go to bed that night. They hear what sounds like Josh in the distance somewhere in the woods screaming bloody murder. Like someone has gotten him. He is done for, right? So Mike takes off first. He leaves the tent, takes off first, screaming, Josh, Josh, Josh. Heather takes off after him. She's always got the camera on her shoulder, though, because that's all she has left. And soon she will have nothing left, not even the camera. Actually, that's not true. The camera's the only thing that endures. Anyway, she takes off running. I know it is. She takes off running after him, screaming, yelling, Josh, Josh. But then she's also calling, Mike, Mike, don't leave me. They come up on this house, and dude, that house is never effing ending.
Yeah.
It's like
huge.
50 stories tall. It's like, if you've ever read, or if you've never read the book House of Leaves, House of Leaves is fascinating. It's basically a story of a house that is significantly bigger on the inside than what it looks like on the outside. And so, yes, it's terrific. The book is terrific. And the book is written in this, I don't even know how to describe it. The text of the book doesn't just run top to bottom, left to right. It runs in the margins. It runs in circles, like literal circles. Like the text is written in like a whirlpool type of font. Like it's a wild experience, and it's all meant to be the soaring thing. So anyway, this House in the Blair Witch is sort of like House of Leaves, or the house in the book House of Leaves. Huge on the inside, really looks like a dilapidated shed on the outside. She decides she's going to find Mike and Josh because the witch will get them, but not me. And she runs up and down the stairs. There's handprints all over the damn wall, which to me is always scary. Like, spooky kids are scary to me. Ghost children, like the one that inhabits my house, and like kid handprints on the wall in the dark, like I will shit my pants. Like the nun could come out of the woodwork. I'd be fine. We would just have a conversation. But a little Henry, like in my house, I'm not messing with Henry. I don't know what that could not be a kid. That could be something else. Anyway, she runs up and down. She finds Mike standing in the corner, right? She calls, she's like whispering at this point, Mike, Mike. And then it's like, I guess she gets slammed into something. And the end of the movie, the final shot is this like glass pane that's just vibrating. And then the movie cuts to credits. I have a theory on the end of the movie. But what do you think?
It's interesting. They filmed a bunch of scenes for the end.
Yeah.
I think Mike getting crucified or Mike being hanged.
Yep.
No, I thought it was clever. I thought it was a good callback to the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Maybe Rustin Parr was, possessed by the Blair Witch, or maybe there was no Blair Witch, but we always talk about the real monsters are human.
Yeah.
They're not ghosts. So, or maybe, Mike and Josh lured Heather into the woods to kill her.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think I read that somewhere, and I was like, oh, interesting.
That's an interesting theory.
Yeah. So I don't know what I think. I was like, I just thought that was a good callback, and I was like, oh, this movie's done now.
I too thought it was a good callback because it was a detail that if you, it's just easy to overlook. Like it's just part of a larger sort of monologue from a character within the very first like 15 minutes of the movie, just sort of detailing the Rustin Parr murders, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, it didn't really seem like those conversations had any bearing or were going to have any bearing on the rest of the movie. And so I thought that was a good little Easter egg at the front end and a good, callback at the end. You're right. I had not heard about the Josh and Mike lure Heather to the forest to that's distressing to think. Like, oh, you know. But it's not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, there's actual like real life stories where that has happened. So that leaves me a little distressed. I thought the Blair Witch possessed Josh, and that Josh screaming in the night was actually him screaming to lure them, and Josh killed them both.
Yeah,
because he was possessed by the Blair Witch.
Yeah,
but it doesn't it's not satisfying, because where do the teeth come from?
Pulls them out himself.
Man, I guess so. I guess that could be it.
Ooh.
Possession makes you do crazy things. We've seen enough possession movies to know that people do stupid shit they wouldn't otherwise do if they weren't possessed. So maybe he ripped out his own teeth and a portion of his tongue or hair or gums, I don't know, and then sent it by carrier pigeon.
Yeah. He dropped it off himself.
A squirrel. Yeah. Oh gosh. Like he just walks through the middle of the night, lays it down neatly, and then carries on about his business. It's possible. I think the ending is super ambiguous. We never actually see the Blair Witch at any point in the movie. We never we only hear about her.
I think there was supposed to be a scene where she does appear in the tent. When they scream, after she's like, what is that?
Yeah.
Apparently one of the crew members was supposed to be dressed in like white, like long johns and white socks. It was supposed to be the Blair Witch, but the person holding the mic, the camera, I think it was Mike, he forgot to pan left. He just kept running straight.
Interesting.
So I think that's one of the things the movie does really well, is they leave most of the leave it up to the viewer's imagination, which makes it scarier, because we could imagine scarier scenarios in our heads than what they actually offer. So I think that's something the movie did really well. And with found footage, you shouldn't wrap things nicely, right?
I agree.
It's real life, and in real life you don't really get answers.
I would say it was a fortunate mistake that he didn't pan left.
Yeah.
Because if the movie is intended to be a found footage, right? Again, they market it as, these people went missing. We haven't seen them. It's sort of it makes the supernatural elements of the movie plausible, because we don't actually see it, right? Otherwise, there's a real risk involved in showing the monster and it not being believable, and it just takes the wind right out of the sails of the movie.
Yeah, especially on a tiny budget. And so we saw that with Winnie the Pooh movie with their terrible masks.
Yeah, and their human hands, like they're, rough, like construction worker hands that are like. it was pretty ridiculous. Now that I think about it, it was ridiculous in a ridiculous movie. But yeah, I think that was maybe a fortunate mistake. I think sometimes the anticipation of fear, or like fear that's based on anticipation, is sometimes scarier than the thing itself. So like the only thing I could think of is, you get to an amusement park, you see how tall the roller coaster is, and like you're in line and your heart is just racing. Then when you get onto the ride, you tend to settle down a little bit. You get off and you're like, oh, like that was awesome. Like that was great. And you hop back in line, or you go to the next ride. But it's really hard to replace or simulate that anticipation, that like anxiety leading up to the thing itself. So I feel like they did a good job of just keeping the viewer anticipating the arrival of the witch. It never comes. And then the movie just ends and you're like, what got them? Where'd she go? What was going on? So I thought that was a really, again, however intentional or not, a pretty good stroke of genius there. I would say the Blair Witch Project is the GOAT of all found footage movies.
Can't really recall many.
But that's the point. They're so forgettable, and they're so dime a dozen at this point.
Yeah. I think one of the movies that did it really well was Cloverfield because it's
Oh, I
not
agree.
all
Okay.
camcorder.
Oh, I
It
agree. I
mostly
agree.
is, I think. And the monster reveal at the end of the movie was just perfectly done.
I actually feel like Cloverfield is a better found footage movie than the Blair Witch Project. So I take it back.
It
I
it had a $30 million budget.
That's fair too. All right, so let's nuance this a little bit. The Blair Witch Project is the goat of all low budget found footage movies. Cloverfield might be the goat found footage movie. I like it. I like it. Enduring legacy. Is there an enduring legacy for this movie, or is it just easily forgotten because it's not as great as it maybe seemed leading up to watching it?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I think just the viral marketing and just the time it came out in
Yep.
makes it such a impactful forerunner to modern day movies. And so, I mean, the plot, acting, direction wise, it's all just like, eh. But for what it is and the time it came out in,
Yeah,
it did a lot of special things, I think.
I agree. It's it definitely has some magic dust sprinkled over it. Because I feel like even the content, right? The subject matter of the movie, like traveling in the woods, haunted camping trip, just seems so cheesy. I mean, it just seems like a really difficult movie to execute. If you were to try to do it big budget, big production, I feel like it would lose the movie itself would lose something. So I feel like this movie worked especially because it was such a low budget film that they didn't have a whole lot of other things at their disposal, which might have just made it a silly, maybe a sillier movie than it actually is. You know, I don't know. I'm sure if I took my old iPhone 7 from 5 years ago and, took it with me to Yellowstone this coming week, was like the Blair Witch, Coffin Rock, Old Faithful, I could probably make something close to.
Yeah, I think so.
Guys,
Support the black and white.
I might just be full of shit, but still, that was the beauty of the movie, though. That's because that's what it felt like. It felt like people just taking their stuff and going out into the woods, and then they don't make it home. Like there's something legitimately scary about that.
Yeah, and I mean, in a day where social media killings, you know, it's powerful in the sense where we can see things happen in real time. You know, people also see people do dumb things in real time that
Yeah,
they shouldn't be doing, and yeah, this was an epic fail on their part.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
What did you think about the stick figures in the trees and the little rock collections?
dude, I don't know. I think because just the reputation of this movie, I didn't really put on my thinking cap.
That's fair.
So when I saw the Karens and the stick figures, I was like, oh, rocks and sticks. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting motif, and I wish they had brought it back in the end too.
I agree.
Yeah. Played up more of the supernatural bit, you know.
I
But
agree.
yeah, it's not as supernatural as it could have been, I think.
I agree. I feel like the supernatural parts were interpretive more than like explicitly shown. So if you're not someone who thinks along those lines, you're just watching three people run around the woods and you're like, these people are dumb. Like I'm not. This is a dumb movie. But if you're someone who enjoys or like sees paranormal things or is, you know, attuned to that kind of thing, you might overinterpret the movie a little bit, which I definitely do. I don't know, man. I like to. There's a part of me that wishes the stick figure showed up at the end, right before they, as they're going to the house. But like not in this way that the characters notice it, but like if you were to rewatch it, you would see a stick figure hanging in in a tree as they're running past, like, and you have to slow the movie down. Or maybe even as, as they get to the house, there's just, you pause the frame and there's, you count 6 stick figures because 6 is the number of evil, right? It's always 6 or 3 a.m. Whatever. I don't know. To me, I wish they would have done something like that. That would have just been a clue, like, hey, there's something paranormal or supernatural that's happening here. They didn't do that. I'll be honest, man. Like we go hiking every couple months as a family, and I always, without fail, I always tell the kids, guys, wouldn't it suck if like we got stuck out here and the Blair Witch got us at night? I don't know where that comes from, other than I don't know, some latent memory when I was 15, and like I grew up in New York City, so you don't have woods. You got dark alleys, but ain't nobody walking down a dark alley at 3 a.m. for no reason. A different kind of spirit will get you. So, for me, the enduring legacy is like, oh, guys, we don't want to get stuck in the woods while we're climbing this mountain. We could die. The Blair Witch could sweep us up on her broom and take us away. Like, I don't know. Maybe the stick figures represented a portal. I don't know. I want there so badly to be some like overt supernatural thing in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, even with the stack of stones, they could have utilized that better, because I think they're supposed to be burial mounds, right?
They are
something like that. Just have like number 3 appear over and over again.
Oh, it would have been awesome. Like
yeah. Like they
even
find Josh's body completely covered in pebbles or something.
Oh,
like
something where they can call back to the Rustin Parr part of it too. Like you had this really well done sort of monologue about like ritual murder and the way that he tied these kids up, that kind of like, that was a really well told narrative, but it didn't go anywhere. I felt like that could have been an opportunity to seize on that narrative and pull the movie forward, but it was just folklore. It just became folklore. It was folklore for the characters and it was folklore for us. And I don't find folklore to be particularly scary. So
yeah, I think because most of the movie was recorded by the 3 actors.
Yeah,
with minimal direction from the directors.
Yeah,
I think that was. I mean, they had a lot of recorded footage. I think about 20 hours worth. I think they should have done some more intentional horror scenes.
These people legitimately went for a camping trip on a weekend and filmed a horror movie. And we talk about like directorial intent a lot in our episodes. It's a hell of a choice to be like, I'm the director and I'm directing you to do whatever you want. Like that's my direction. That's my style, and that's my choice here. No script, no nothing. Just a haunted story. You're going to go and you're going to see if you can find evidence. That's a choice.
It was not very well thought out.
I'll say this. For all of my disappointment with the movie, I still think it's a classic. It's definitely not anywhere near my top 25. And if I had to make a list of like a top 25 found footage movies of all time, it would be Cloverfield 1 through 24 and The Blair Witch number 25.
Yeah.
And everything else after.
I mean, I think it would be on a list of important horror movies.
Agreed.
Yeah. Just like, how Psycho would be on it. And yeah. But favorites, not really up there for me.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I agree. It's fine. If you've never seen it, watch it in a dark room with a big screen. Sound all the way up for sure. It's very much an auditory experience. In fact, I would say because there's not a whole lot of horror elements visually, you have to listen to it really loudly in order to catch anything and to make it scary. So also, you're going to want to offer Heather's character a Kleenex 3/4 of the way in just know that if you are someone who's really grossed out by snot, this movie has an excess amount of snot in it.
I feel so bad for the actress. She got a lot of crap after the movie.
I know.
And I think she's like a medical marijuana farmer now. Yeah. I don't know. I think women just get a hard time for some reason. Yeah.
Yep.
So whether it's like this movie or Skylar from Breaking Bad or even like Shiv from Succession, people just love hating on the women.
I actually like Skylar's character in Breaking
Oh, you do?
Bad. I do.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I might be in the minority there. I found her to be just super sad. Like a victim of everybody else's stuff.
It's like if anyone's had a really shitty dad, you understand where Skylar's coming from.
Yeah, for sure.
You should at least.
I agree. I think the empathy is strong with her. I need to watch Breaking Bad again. We watched it about a year ago. I mean, just binge watched the whole thing in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm rewatching The Sopranos right now. And that's been really good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Guys, I think we've exhausted the Blair Witch. I don't think that the sequels are trash. Don't watch them. The one that came out a couple years after the original and the one that was released 5 or 6 years ago, just really not good. They're not good horror movies. They're not good movies. Not worth your time. This one is barely worth your time. 5 minutes longer and it would not be worth your time. But I really love this one. So deal with that irony. It's what it is. All right, everyone. Well, that's a wrap on the Blair Witch Project. Special shout out again and thank you to my co-host Chris for joining me on this episode. If you're listening, I don't take it for granted that you're spending your time with us. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave that 5-star review. This is Will signing off. I will catch you next week on One Good Scare.